Hello, everyone. Welcome to the True Crime Grapple bonus show. And I've got back with me again Jim Pitts, the writer of True Crime Grapple, or one of our writers. Jim, how is Texas these days?
Texas is hot and dry in my part. The south part was hit by a tropical storm last week, so they're flooded, but we're hot and dry.
Sounds fantastic. That's we're going to be getting some of that down here in Melbourne pretty soon. We're in just hit spring here, and but it's actually quite cold at the minute. But once them summer months come and you get that dry heat in Melbourne, it is pretty brutal. Anyway,
Yeah,
so we're not here to talk about the weather. We're here to talk about something else. And the only reason we're able to kind of do this today, and I guess we should just be a little bit transparent in that we're kind of flung ourselves in here a little bit at the deep end, but it is uncut, it is uncensored. I'm off work today. It's a Monday over here in Melbourne. I've got a day off work. And Jim, it's Sunday there, obviously. Yeah.
right, right.
So,
Sunday, about yeah, it's almost Monday, but it's still Sunday night here.
yeah, yeah. So it's one of them little opportunities we had to sort of take to get a bonus episode recorded, and here we are. And we are talking about the KFC murders. Now, Jim, that was your first story.
First,
Um,
yeah, first one that I wrote the entire amount. The first one that I picked.
that's right. You did a bit, or you did quite a bit on the True Part Two.
Yeah, right.
Helped me out with that one, and we sort of collaborated a little bit on that one,
Yeah,
although sort of separately, but we filled in the gaps where each of us
I was
didn't.
back. I was back when I had absolutely no clue what I was doing.
Who says you have a clue now?
I don't have much of a clue, but I have a little bit better of a clue now.
Like, don't
Uh,
let whatever Patty is saying to your wife. I'm sure she's just doing it to be nice.
Probably, probably. Jeez.
So anyway, let's talk about the KFC stuff. This is a good one to start off with for you, I thought, because a Texas case from Kilgore. How did you come to find this one, and what was it that attracted you to the case?
Well, the this was always kind of my idea for the first one I wanted to write about because this one I kind of lived through. I grew up near Kilgore.
Mm.
There's a little town mentioned several times in the story called Overton,
Yep.
which is a town about 2,000 that I grew up in. And even though he was a little bit older than I was, I knew one of the victims. In fact, he was at our house a couple nights before the murders occurred.
Mm.
And so this is something that I saw firsthand with. And so it was always real personal to me. It's something I've always followed for the last 30, was a bit, see, actually last Monday was the 36th anniversary of it.
Wow. Wow. So it's quite timely that we're actually doing this episode in a way.
Right, right.
That's that's fascinating. And who was that victim?
Joey Johnson, which was one of the guys that was working at the KFC that night, was a graduate of my high school, and
Hmm.
it was a real small high school, and the in fact the grades 6 through 12, I'm sorry, 7 through 12 were all in the same building,
Right.
or in the same two buildings, and so when I was a seventh grader, Joey was a senior, and he had a class right before mine, a math class, and I remember since he knew who I was, I'd walk in every day as he was leaving, and he'd hit me in the arm every day, just to kind of pick on me, just like, hey, I know you're a seventh grader, I know who you are.
Mm.
Uh, and so I mean, I knew him growing up until the murders occurred my ninth grade year.
Right.
So about 2 years after, about a year and a half after he graduated from high school. But
And
he still lived there. In fact, his little sister, one of his little sisters, was in my class. Uh, we only had about 30 people in our class. I mean, we knew everybody. He knew
yeah.
everybody well.
Mm. And was it just because did that relationship come about just through the small area and then everybody knowing everybody, or was it through family connections?
Yeah, it was pretty much just kind of we all went. Everybody knew everybody,
Yeah.
And I mean, there were people who were obviously closer to him than I was, and I, like I said, his sister was in my class. And I knew her. She was kind of quiet. In fact, she never came back to class after the murders occurred. I
Oh
saw her
wow.
at the funeral. I saw her at the funeral, and that's the only time I'd seen her
Yeah.
since after the murders, since that Friday night, since that Friday day.
Mm.
And so, and in a minute, we'll kind of talk about how it was from my point of view uh, that day that we found out about the murders.
Yeah. Well, I guess we should set the scene here to somewhat. It's 1983. It's in
Right.
September, and Kilgore, small population of around 500 people at the time,
No,
and
no, 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 no. Kilgore was about 10,000 at the time.
at the time, sorry, right, okay,
I,
yeah,
th- I think. Well, I'd gone into the history a little bit in the story about Kilgore. Kilgore was a oil field town back in the 30s. It was
yep,
about 500 then, and then the oil field came in, and it became a boom town after that.
right. Yeah, sorry, my mistakes. I'm just looking at my
Yeah,
notes there, and I missed that first part.
yeah,
The part that clearly says in front of it in 1930, Kilgore.
yeah. Well, we said we were
So
winging this tonight, so
we are okay, yeah. Um, I just have to. I'm just looking for it now on the script here, and it was the bit I remember reading it, and it was the part about Adolf Hitler. Do you want to fill in the listeners of that for that aren't familiar with that little fact? Because
well,
when I first read that, I was like, oh, that's what a great nugget of information that is.
yeah, yeah, and I love little things like that because being the history guy that I am, that knowing little things like that. The bodies for the KFC murder were found next to a cemetery, kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Uh, Cemetery, I think it's called Pleasant Hill Cemetery. And I'm amazed at the number of Pleasant Hill cemeteries that are around. But even with the Bath massacre, there was a Pleasant Hill Cemetery. Anyway,
Wow.
the uh, and so I want to give a little bit of background about the history behind Pleasant Hill Cemetery. And Pleasant Hill Cemetery, which is between Overton and Henderson, another town, uh, is made up of mostly small children graves from a
Mm,
school explosion back in the 1930s. A little town called New London blew up. The school did, and killed something in the neighborhood of 300 people, most of them children. And they buried a lot of these children out there at the cemetery. And
yep.
it was such a horrific event that Adolf Hitler sent a telegram expressing his condolences.
Mm,
And it's just always struck me that this is 1936. Hitler is sending a telegram to New London, Texas about the loss of these children at the same time as he was, you know, getting everything in order to to do the Holocaust.
yeah.
And here he is expressing sympathy for these children. And so it's always uh, been something that stuck out in my mind. And you can actually see the telegram if they have a little museum there, and you can actually go see the telegram that was from Hitler. And another little thing, this may mean more to meet people my age. Walter Cronkite, famous American news broadcaster. He's the one that you see all the stuff about, landing on the moon.
Hmm.
All the audio from the U.S. about that. Probably the most respected news guy in U.S. history. That was one of his first stories as a national reporter.
Right.
And he said, he's covered wars and so forth, and he's seen all this tragedy. He said, but that was the most tragic event he had ever seen, and it's the reason why natural gas has a smell in it today.
Yeah.
Because
And
before then,
also, sorry, Jim, because I don't think we mentioned, but that was a build up. That explosion was because of a build up of gas.
right,
Um, and yeah, and tragic. Obviously, it's but can't continue with your thought. Sorry, finish your thought there.
yeah. Well, no, it was just that I was going to say what you just said about the explosion occurred because of a buildup of natural gas underneath the school that nobody could smell when they plugged in a a like a sander late in the
Mhm.
day. The school, the spark ignited the school,
Yep.
And fortunately, most of the little kids already gone home for the day because it was late in the day when this happened. Uh, but a lot, just that little event, just tons of interesting little facts came out from it. And
Absolutely.
I actually did. And I hadn't told you this before. I actually did my what was called at the time student teaching. Now they call it an internship. But back when I was finishing up college to be a teacher, we had to go into schools and teach for a semester.
Mm.
And that school is not called New London anymore, but that school is where I did my student teaching back in the early '90s.
Wow. So you're actually kind of just spread around all over this case.
Yeah,
Um,
and
which
and 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 going back to the school, if you remember from the story, Joey had a new girlfriend, and she was still in high school, and she went to that school. It's called Russ Russ. It's called Russ Russ now, and I didn't know that until I started researching this. I didn't know he had a girlfriend who was about a year older than me.
so we mentioned Joy, obviously, and you had a connection with him, and the other victims were Mary Tyler, Opie Hughes, David Maxwell, and Monty Landers.
Right.
Do you know?
And
Yep. Sorry.
go
On
ahead.
you go, Tom.
Go ahead, because I'm probably going to answer your question. But go ahead.
Well, my question was just going to be: did you have any sort of a connection or knowing of any of these people?
Yeah, there was one more, David Maxwell. I have a sister who's about their age, and she very briefly dated David Maxwell. Now I never met him or had seen him before, but I remember my sister had dated, maybe gone out on maybe one date with him uh, a couple of years before this happened. He had since gotten married. In fact, his wife was pregnant when the murders occurred,
Mm.
and she gave birth, I think, almost exactly 6 months to the day after the murders occurred.
Yeah. So the bodies are discovered, as you mentioned, in a field there by by a worker, and he discovers a few of the bodies, and then he discovers was it one more sort of away from. So they were all. It was almost like they were all sort of laid out um, and murdered, and then we had another body that was away from the group.
Right. The thought was at the time that four of them were found laying face down with their hands behind their heads,
Mm.
and the thought was that they had laid all five of them out there, and they were going down the line and shooting them because the fourth one, or the one that was on the end, was Joey, and he was slightly risen.
Mm.
And then you had one more body that was about 50 yards away. So the thought at the time was that as they were going down the line, the ones on the other end figured out what was going on, and that the woman got up and ran away, and then Joey was trying to get away. Uh, but then when they actually held the trial in the early 2000s, we found out that that was not quite the case. That there was a third person that was there that night that they've never identified, and that they had sexually assaulted the girl that was taken that was off that was found 50 yards away.
Yeah, and we'll come to that in a little bit more detail at
Yeah.
toward the end. But once the bodies are discovered, it doesn't take long for a connection to be made to the local KFC, because from memory, is it three of the individuals that were found worked there, or actually four did, didn't they?
Four worked there. Three were actually working at the time
Four worked there. Three were on were
on
working at
duty.
the time
Um,
on
yeah.
duty, and I think it was Joey. He'd gone in to drop something off. Is
Uh,
that correct?
Joey was there. David had come to pick Joey up.
That's it. Yeah, and
They were sharing a
Monty.
motorcycle or so, and then
That's
Monty was just
correct.
hanging around with them.
That's
They were all
correct. Yeah,
friends. They went to Kilgore College. They were all hanging around.
yeah, yeah. And the connection was made, and that's where the investigation started. And they found a big disturbance at the KFC restaurant itself, and that would be where the first clues were picked up. From there, they knew it was going to be a big case, and they got the Texas Rangers involved quite early on, didn't they, Jim?
Right, right. Because the Kilgore knew that they weren't going to be able to handle a
Mm.
case of this magnitude.
Yep.
This was still 1983. I mean, it was only a town of 10,000, and they just didn't have anything like this occur that often.
Yep.
And of course, the Texas Rangers are fairly legendary throughout the state, and so they got them involved pretty quickly.
Yep. And we had leading up there, we had Sergeant Danny Purtle of the Kilgore Police Department. But they also started taking a lot of photographs of the scene, as you do, the crime scene techs. Or they probably wouldn't have had techs there actually. It would have just been the investigators themselves. But there was an early hitch with that because they used to have a process for developing the photos, didn't they, Jim? And something happened there, and they lost a lot of evidence.
Yeah, this I thought was crazy, and I didn't quite understand why they did it this way, or if this was common practice for 1983. But in order to save money, they just basically developed the pictures themselves, or
Mm.
used the fire department to do it, or something like that. And when they went to pick up the pictures, most of them were gone.
Mm.
And so, I mean, they lost a lot of crucial evidence, and this would be very important later on when they actually did have the trials, that this stuff was missing, and exactly what happened to, exactly why did it happen. It kind of boggled my mind that even in 1983, people, I thought, I know it's an expensive process to develop pictures, and we're probably talking hundreds of pictures in this at this point, but still, it seems a little important, especially with that being the only tool of the time. I mean, one of the few tools that they had, technology wise.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, it is such an important thing. Yeah, I mean, you've got to go all out to do the process properly. It seems a little bit crazy. And well, it wasn't long till they had an interesting character as a suspect, as an early suspect, and this is going to be James Ellie Mankins Jr.
Right.
His father, a local businessman and well thought of in the community, but Mankins Jr. himself was quite known around town to be involved in the drug scene, and he had a criminal record of sorts. Interesting character, and he right up until pretty much when the DNA came through, he was always a suspect, was he not?
Right. And I'll tell a little bit about my family history with this. Uh, my other sister didn't always make the best. She's also older than I am. She always didn't make the best choices in the world, and or end up dating or marrying the best guys in the world. And so it's at some period of time after the murders occurred, she got to know a lot of the people that were in the drug scene in Kilgore and the surrounding areas, and they kept saying that Makins was involved. Makins was involved, and then they they try to tie him to a fingernail
Mm.
because when he came in for the early interviews, he had a damaged fingernail, and then they found a fingernail in one of the bodies that looked very similar, and so they eventually indicted him in the mid '90s for this, and we thought, finally. And then the DNA came back and it said, nope, not him. And he was not the third person that was at uh, the murder site.
And it's good. It's good that you actually bring up that point about the fingernail because I'm just looking at the notes here, and it says that they quickly examined the fingernails of the five victims. But as we know, as would later be determined, that that fingernail would belong to Mary Tyler.
Right.
So obviously another botch there, and quite a big botch. They were
Yeah.
quick to make an assumption that Mankins was in fact. It's quite an amazing coincidence when you think about it. But still, you've got to do your due diligence there as the police and make sure all the checks are checked off. So that was a big miss there.
For years, the rumors in the area was that because anytime you have a bunch of a bunch of agencies involved, because we had the murders and the kidnappings occurred in two different counties. The kidnappings took place in Gregg County, and the murders took place in Rusk County. And then you have the kidnapping also taking place inside the city of Kilgore. So you got Kilgore Police Department, Gregg County Sheriff's Office, Rusk County Sheriff's Office, plus bring in the Texas Rangers.
Right.
So that's four agencies that are involved that all want to make the big uh,
The
come with
big
a big break in
catch.
the case.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the rumor always was that the agencies weren't necessarily cooperating a whole lot with each other
Mm.
because they wanted to save what they had found for themselves. Now, how true
Right.
that is, I don't know. That was just, like I said, that was just rumors that we were kept hearing in that area. I lived in that area up until the mid '90s, and so about 12 years for about 12 years after this occurred. So I mean, we were hearing rumors all the time about what
Yeah.
was going on. And there was another another big rumor at the time was, and I used to hear this from my sister, that was that it was a drug hit, and that inside the safe at KFC, one of the female workers had some kind of drug recipe, and somebody wanted it back, and so they came to get it, and then everybody else was just kind of collateral.
Mm.
And there have been several different versions of that story, uh, but they all kind of center around that it was a drug hit after one person, and the other four just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Uh, Now, how true? I mean, how much they had to do with it? No, but nobody's until the two guys they have in jail actually tell what happened or why they did it. Uh, that may be just one of those things that we never know.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And well, obviously there's something else that we may never know, as you alluded to earlier. But there was suspects were starting to be eliminated, and there was a there was a total of 56 names on the initial sort of suspect list, which Mankins himself was on because back at this time it was still in the early days of the investigation. But there was two other names that propped up, and that was a couple of cousins or cousins, Darnell Hartsfield and Romeo Pinkerton. These
Right.
guys are from Tyler, Texas. Um, Tell us a little bit about them from your memory from the background.
Well, they had one of them, and I can't, I don't have my notes with me, but one of them had committed a robbery in Tyler a couple days, like on the 26th of September, 2 or 3 days, about 3 days after the murders in Kilgore. And Tyler is it's about 45 minutes from Kilgore.
Right.
I mean, they're not exactly right next door.
Yeah.
Uh, and I kind of lived in between the two. I grew up about 10 minutes from Kilgore and about 30 minutes from Tyler. Tyler's a little bit bigger city. Tyler's, well, at that time, was about 70,000 people. Um, it was kind of the biggest city in that part of Texas. And, but one of them had robbed a little convenience store
Yeah.
uh, on the 26th. And something I found out when I was writing this, I was talking to my family about this, and my mom was telling me that the girl that was working that night at the convenience store eventually came to work with my dad at one time, and then she came to work with my mom in the insurance business because my dad worked in Tyler.
Mm.
And she said that the girl was quite traumatized by this robbery, even though one of the books I read about this kind of minimized that event. Uh, According to this girl, she was the only one working that night. She was made to lay down the floor. Of course, the KFC Murders was on everybody's mind. They just happened 3 nights before, and so she was terrified. And when my parents worked with her, she had to go back. It was about the time that she had to go back and testify. Or when my mom worked with her, was about the time she had to go testify in the trials, and she did not want to go.
Mm.
But one of them had robbed this convenience store to get cash to buy drugs that night, and the other one claimed to be in prison down in Houston at the time.
Right.
That he was. He'd gotten out. He didn't get out until about a week later.
This was Pinkerton, and when he was interviewed,
okay,
he told the investigators that he was about 300 kilometers south in Houston, and
right.
his release had been delayed till after the murders because of Hurricane Alicia.
Right, which I don't know why this wasn't checked out closer at the time. I guess because with the number of suspects they had to get through, they probably just said, okay, sure, and decided we'll check it out later, because the hurricane occurred about a month before. Occurred in mid-August. Because I went back and researched it just because I was curious to know what the timing of it was. And the hurricane occurred, I want to say, mid-August.
Right.
And so, but they believed him at the time, and they kind of got forgotten about for many years.
So so for the rest of the 80s and for part of the 90s, nothing really new came to light in the case. But then you have the Attorney General for the state of Texas. This is Dan Morales. He requested to take over the case, and it being a cold case, obviously a massive case in Texas, he possibly felt that it would be politically in his favor to get this one solved, and it would do him wonders for his career.
Yeah, he was looking at a possible run for governor.
Right.
And he was thinking that, hey, if we can solve this case, that'd be a great thing for me. It gets my name out there, and it boosts his potential campaign for governor. And so that's kind of how the Attorney General's office got involved.
And of course, he focused on that torn fingernail.
Right.
And lots of time was wasted on that as a result.
It got him in a lot of trouble with Mankins, because I believe it was when Morales got involved, was when they indicted Mankins for this murder, and then they figured out that no, this isn't right.
And he just happened to the judge set his bail at $2.5 million, $500,000 for each victim.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So at the arraignment, Mankins was represented by a defense lawyer called Darrell Bennett, and he pleaded not guilty to all 5 of the indictments, which was obviously to be expected. We then move on. So the trial was set for the late fall in 1995, and this is in Beaumont, Texas, about 320 kilometers south of Kilgore. And the prosecution, so where are we here? Oh, here we go. There's another little interesting one. It agreed to have Herbert McDonald, who was the striation expert from the O.J. Simpson trial. He examined the torn nail.
Yeah, that's something I didn't know, that it was somebody from the O.J. Simpson trial.
Yeah, that's amazing. And
yeah, but you got to understand, this was what, 95, and so
correct.
The O.J. Simpson trial was huge at the time.
Oh, it was huge everywhere. I remember, obviously a bit of a sidebar here, but I remember going into. So I think I was 13 at the time, and I was sort of new into high school, and we were asked to give a brief report of something current that's going on in the world, and just stand up and give a chat about it. And I actually spoke about the O.J. Simpson trial, actually watching it on television, and to which my English teacher, I think it was English, my English teacher told me she was quite interested in the case, and I remember watching that, and there was nothing really much going on in the trial at the time. It was one of them kind of because obviously that was the first real kind of full televised trial. Is that right, OJ?
Uh, it
I know,
was one of the first ones that really captured the nation's attention on kind of on a large scale. I know Bundy was like
Ted Bundy.
the first one televised. Because
Yeah,
when I was growing up, trials weren't televised. I mean, that's why you had all the courtroom drawings, and that's the only way we saw what was going on in the courtroom was the drawings. And then by the time Bundy came around, they decided, you know what, to be more transparent, maybe we should put trials on TV, which I thought was a brilliant idea. It's like, hey, why not? And then so we had Bundy, and then OJ came along about a decade, a little bit more than a decade later. But OJ was the one that it just blew up. And I can remember, I mean, you were talking about being a high school student. I can remember they announced the verdict, which would have been the fall of '95 or so. Um, I mean, it was only 24 years ago, I guess. And at the time, we had to bring a radio into the classroom to listen to the verdict. And I tell that to my students today, and they're like, why don't y'all just watch it on the computer?
mm.
Like, we didn't have computers in the classroom at the time. And we sure didn't have the internet. And we brought a radio in to listen to the verdict that day. Because, I mean, it was just something that everybody was interested in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember. Yeah, Bundy. I've seen clips of his court case.
Now, that would have been fun to watch. I wish I could.
Oh,
I mean, I was probably about 10 at the time, and I didn't have a clue what's going on. That would have been.
have you seen the clips where he's got to cross-examine the copper that arrested him, and he's sitting there, and the judge is like, the judge is waiting for him to for Bundy to stand up and start cross-examining this copper, and the judge just gets tired of waiting around for him, and he just goes, Bundy, and then he just looks up, and then he gets up and he starts cross-examining this copper, talking about himself in the third person. It's very weird, and then he turns and gives a little snigger to the odd the people in the courtroom. It was a farce really in so many respects, that Bundy being allowed to represent himself. It was but interesting. I mean, unbelievable.
And of course, we can blame the OJ trial for giving us the Kardashians. So,
Yeah, true.
because I mean, I'd never heard of the Kardashians until the OJ trial.
Yeah,
And there's
yeah.
Robert Kardashian. Of course, I didn't know his kids at the time, but all I knew was that he used to be married. That his ex-wife was married to Bruce Jenner,
Hmm.
which was that's like, hey, I know who Bruce Jenner is because that's like the first Wheaties box I ever noticed.
Yeah,
That was like seven during the '76 Olympics. So, um, I mean, that's it was. I mean, that's what. Well, if we just go back in time and just tell OJ, don't do it.
yeah, absolutely. So, obviously, we're going back to this case now, and everything was on the fingernail, and the DNA experts came back. Mankins was not a match to the fingernail. So, without any evidence against him, the judge had no choice but to dismiss all the five capital murder incidents against him. Morales, he vowed to keep investigating, but he'd kind of put all his eggs in one basket there with that fingernail. And he left the office in early 1999.
Well,
You've got here
no,
in your
go ahead.
notes. There was a little bit of an ironic twist. Talk about that.
Yeah, Morales got in a little bit of trouble. I don't know if it was that's why he left office or he just needed reelected. But he got, if I remember right, it was what did he do? Some fraud charges.
Mail fraud and income tax evasion.
That's what he did, and he ended up getting sent to prison where he got sent to the same prison that Mankins was in. For Mankins got sent to prison for other charges.
Mm.
Uh, but they ended up sharing a prison together at one time. I can't imagine what that conversation was like.
It's incredible, just the little tidbits of information that are in here spotted throughout, and everything's coming back around at some point in this story. It seems like it's quite incredible.
Yeah, unfortunately at that time though, we were thinking, well, this will never, it'd been 13, 14 years.
Hmm.
And DNA, because of the O.J. Simpson trial, was just now in everybody's thoughts about how, but we had no idea that DNA was saved from all these old cold cases. And so the uh, at that time we were kind of given up hope as far as what would be the uh, that this would ever be solved.
Well, there was
Because
one.
Joey was still pretty much in everybody's mind in my hometown, because even up to this time, because after he died, uh, they used to give an award at my school for outstanding male athlete. It was named the Joey Johnson Award,
Yeah,
and that was like the coveted end of the year award for athletes at my school. And 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 they don't they've since quit doing that, but at the time he was still a large presence there. No,
sure. There was one person that wasn't given up, and that was a young lawyer at the Attorney General's office by the name of Lisa Tanner.
right,
Now, she picked this back up again, and she wanted to do some more investigations into the fingernail, and she was able to establish that the fingernail did indeed, or it didn't match Mankin's. We already knew that, so he was already out of the picture by this time. But she was able to find who it did belong to, and it was, of course, Mary Tyler, one of the five victims.
right.
So we had, unbelievably, 12 years of going back and forth with this fingernail, which the whole case rested on in some respects as to finding a suspect, and it all came to naught.
Right.
And
Because we all thought, hey, the fingernail's the key. The fingernail's the key.
mm,
And then all of a sudden, it's not the key anymore.
that's right. So Tana herself, where did she go from here? She went back to look at the blood evidence from 1983,
Well,
and
if I remember right, I don't have it in front of me, but I think that because of the O.J. Simpson trial, she kind of like, hey, we this DNA, we know we've got some blood evidence that we might be able to test, and they started to go back and look over some of the clothing to see maybe if they could find anything else. And they noticed a stain on one of the women's pants.
right,
And so they had that tested to see what it was.
and there was also a bloody napkin as well.
Right, right. That was the napkin and the box
Yeah,
that they had. Of course, when I can remember when this first occurred, they kept talking. People, the rumors were going around that they found blood, they found blood, they found blood. But then they decided it was chicken blood that was
right.
on the floor, and I don't know if that was just. Of course, like I said, we heard lots of rumors, and so I don't know if that was the blood that they eventually tested or what. But I know there was a napkin and a box that was kind of two key pieces of evidence.
Well, they ran these samples through CODIS, and the results came back, and Romeo Pinkerton was connected to the napkin, and Donnell Hartsfield was connected to the box. So they had their two guys. They had their two men, and who were all, of course, also they were questioned beforehand, and they'd given their bullshit alibis. They both stated that they had never been at the KFC before.
Yeah, and
Uh,
that was kind of a key point that they had maintained they had never been inside the KFC. They couldn't committed these kidnappings because they were never inside. But then when it came back that they had DNA inside of theirs, then that kind of show that they were lying about being in there. And so it kind of, everything else they said came into question now.
That's right.
Like the day he got out of prison down in Houston.
So we had Lorna Beasley. She was a forensic DNA expert with the Texas DPS, and she told Tanner she had some good news and bad news for her. Now, they almost had a full DNA profile, but they didn't. It didn't match. They had a third, sorry, DNA full profile that didn't match either Hartsfield or Pinkerton.
Right. And that was kind of the oh no moment. Like, we've looked at this for years, and now you're telling us there's another person involved that we didn't know about.
That is quite an incredible moment. I mean, it's you can imagine being investigators there, and you're in one hand you're like, well, brilliant, we've got Pinkerton, we've got Hartsfield, and then you find out that, and you're like, shit, there's someone else, and quite the moment I would have imagined. So they did some more DNA testing. They're looking for this third person. They tested more than 180 men, but unfortunately, there would never be a match that would come back. They only got the race, which was African American. It also 100% ruled out Mankins. Of course, he's Caucasian. That's an important part to clarify there. And then so they would set up for the trial case, but they let that known that there was obviously the third person. They didn't know who he was. So it takes us through to October 2005 in Hartsfield. He would go on trial, but this is not for murder. This is for lying about being in the KFC.
And this is one of the things I find just totally bizarre about this case was that they couldn't make anything stick on him at the time, and so they really wanted to get him for something.
Mm-hmm.
And so they ended up charging him with perjury when he lied to the grand jury about being inside the KFC.
Right.
And because they could show that he was actually inside the KFC. He told the grand jury under oath that he didn't go inside there. He's lying, and he got convicted of perjury.
Yeah.
And then he got sentenced to some crazy number of years. I think he got life.
He got life, yeah. I think
for perjury.
Yeah.
And so that kind of is what got the ball rolling as far as the other prosecution about the two murders. The two murderers of the 5 murders.
Well, it only took the jury 2 hours to convict him on aggravated perjury, and he was given, as you said, a life sentence. But things would start to move a little bit more quickly. A couple of weeks later, Greg Abbott, the Attorney General for the state of Texas, who's now, the Attorney General of the state of Texas.
Yeah, he's Attorney General then, and he's the governor now.
And he's the governor of the state now, yeah. That's right. He indicted both Hartsfield and Pinkerton on the 5 counts of capital murder for the KFC case. So here we go. They're going to go back on trial, and this time for the murders. Pinkerton, he went first on trial in August 6, 2007. Change of venue was granted, and the trial was moved to New Boston, 180 kilometers away.
Right. For those of you kind of familiar with this area, New Boston is located in the extreme upper right-hand corner of Texas. It's near a town called Texarkana, which is on the Texas-Arkansas border. And so, it was moved a couple hours away from Kilgore.
That's good to know. And, Tanner began by dropping a bombshell in the case, of course, in the opening statement. And this must have been... Well, let's read out that... Let's go through what she said. She announced that there was some seminal fluid found in the crotch of Opie's uniform pants, and it didn't match any known individual. So obviously we know that there's a third person involved somewhere down the line. What do you think the tactics were to release that information in the opening statement?
I think they wanted to get ahead of the defense. I think they were worried that the defense was going to come back and say, "Hey, there's a DNA profile that you can't match to the murders."
Hmm.
And I think the defense was going to say, "Hey, my client participated in the robbery, but they didn't participate in the murders."
Right.
And there was nothing tying the Hartsfield or Pinkerton to the murder scene. They could tie him to the kidnapping scene, but not the murder scene.
Right.
And
Right.
so I think the whole plan was we're going to go ahead and put this out in the open that we've got uh, a third DNA, and kind of so it wouldn't be so shocking when the defense mentioned it.
Right. Pinkerton, he maintained his innocence throughout. He was claiming still that he was in the jail in Houston. And what do we have here? We had a bit of damaging stuff for Pinkerton's case. Is that an inmate called Ronald Null, who had met Pinkerton in Smith County Jail. He testified that when talking to Pinkerton about the KFC case, he thought that it was strange that Pinkerton asked him if he thought DNA could still be on a napkin after all of these years.
Yeah,
It's one of these ones where you're kind of like, the prosecution's going to bring in this witness to give this statement, and it can sort of easily be kind of shit on by the prosecution for the fact that, hey, this is an inmate giving this, and these two guys could have had a beef in prison.
right.
What do you make of that?
It's what it's one of those things I think it's risky for the prosecution to try because it's like you said, it's so easy for the defense to say, "Hey, wait a second, this guy's getting something," and so the prosecution has to take a risk that their guy seems believable,
Mm.
and so the jury obviously believed this inmate in his story. And then my question would have been, when did he find out about the napkin?
Sure.
So if he was saying this before they really talked a lot about the DNA on the napkin, how would he have known about the napkin at the time?
Yeah.
Or did he find out about this, or did he find out the napkin first and then say this, or you know? So I think I don't remember the timing issues of all that. Uh, so for whatever reason, the jury believed this inmate and what he said.
Well, the trial went on for a few weeks for Pinkerton, and the day before, where are we now? Well, he agreed to plead guilty to 5 counts of murder in exchange for no death penalty, but it was 5 life sentences instead. Now, this is the bit that I struggle with. Surprisingly, he's going to be eligible for parole at some point. Is that just something that they tagged on there with actually no intention of really letting the guy out?
I think so. I think that was part of in order to get him to agree to it, they said, hey, we'll give you parole. We'll give you a chance at parole at a certain point. I mean, I think it's kind of usual somebody get 5 life sentences and then be up for parole. And so, but I think that was just kind of a little carrot they were dangling in front of him in order to say, hey, yeah, sure, we'll give you a chance at parole, thinking that he would never, ever, ever get it.
Mm.
And I think actually he came up just within the last month or two, and he was denied.
And how does that work over in the States? Or I don't know if they do it differently in each state, but like in the UK, I'm sure you've heard about it. Someone might be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure. So there's really like no sort of time limit on how much time they're going to spend in jail. what's the system like over? Well, let's just stick to this case. What are they saying? When will he next be up for parole again, or is there a date on when he'll be up for parole?
Yeah, I'm not sure that the what they had what they had told him or what they decided on the years. I want to say he's come up for parole twice now, and I know usually they say, okay, you've got to serve X number of years before you come up for parole, and uh, then we'll look at the case then. And then I want to say in his case, uh, can you hear that?
Is that the dogs coming in?
That's the dogs fighting over a plastic bag. Sorry. Uh, they're crazy tonight.
This
Anyway,
is real. This is we're live, folks. We're just
yeah,
recording.
they, yeah, one of them's just tearing a plastic bag up right now. He's having a good time with it. Oh Lord. Anyway, and so I think what I read this summer was that he has to wait another 5 years before he can ask for parole again.
Right.
And they have to be they have to be in their 60s by now.
Mm.
Uh, so I don't think they're ever gonna get out. I know one of the stories I read was about one of Joey's sisters always writing a letter to the parole board, and how much she hates doing it because it brings back the memories for her again. But she's
Oh,
gonna do it every time, and
absolutely,
so to make sure he doesn't get out.
absolutely. Next on the chopping block, of course, is Hartsfield, who's already on that life sentence for the perjury charge, and it was more of the sort of the same in the trial, with regards to the evidence, of course, and he got the same
Right.
as his old mate Pinkerton.
I think the only difference between the two trials was that we talked about one being in New Boston, Texas, and the second one they moved to Bryan, Texas, uh, which your American listeners probably familiar with Bryan being part of Bryan College Station, which is the home of Texas A&M University, and so that's where they had the second trial.
Right. Well, we're going to wrap this up in a sec, Jim. I've got to get away actually, and I'm pretty sure them dogs are wanting attention. So, let's just finish up on the legacy of this case. What was learned from it, in your opinion, in terms of maybe perhaps the investigation, how it was conducted, and the area itself, how it was affected?
Well, the I don't know if anything's changed too much on investigations as far as cooperation. I think there's still a lot of rivalries between the individual investigative units. We still hear about that all the time, uh, and I know that that's one of the counter forensic measures that criminals do is that they make sure they do different parts of their crimes in different jurisdictions. So to make sure that they kind of get that conflict going. As far as the area, the KFC tried to reopen, and I know it as like I said, I was 14 at the time. I'm sorry, I was 14 at the time, and I know it affected a lot of parents as far as whether or not they want their kids to work at these type of jobs. And I think KFC changed their policies because at the time it was thought that the people were that the, that it was they most people thought at the time that the original thought was it was a robbery gone bad, that the KFC employees were taking the trash out
Mm.
and they were able to get access to there was only one employee taking out the trash, and the perpetrators were able to get access to the inside of the KFC through this back door. And so I know KFC instituted some changes as far as closing times, uh, wouldn't let their employees take out trash by themselves anymore. But the KFC did not last. When it reopened, it didn't last very long. There in Kilgore, and then by the mid '90s, I actually, I was telling you that I'd done my internship on teaching at the Southern School, but my first job was actually in Kilgore, teaching at the middle school. And by that time, it was I don't know who thought this would be a good idea, but it eventually became a butcher shop.
Oh my God.
And I'm thinking, who came up with that idea?
Jeez.
And it's been completely torn down today. And I think today it's just an office building is sitting there.
Yeah, I think you mentioned to me you drove past it not too long ago. Is that right?
Right, right. I think it's a doctor's office. I think now. And so, but I will say this. This is something that has come up recently. I know that one of my friends on Facebook graduated with Joey, and there's been a big push. They're establishing a scholarship in his name, and they've been doing a lot of fundraising this fall for the scholarship. And so that's something that's new that has kept Joey's memory alive. Mm-hmm. And one of his sisters has been really involved in it.
Yep.
And then I guess we heard from another family member of one of the other victims recently. Do you remember that?
No, who was that?
What a stepdaughter posted.
Oh yes.
That made a mistake.
That's right. Yeah.
So I want to apologize now for that.
Yeah, she commented on the our YouTube page, and then she sent a message on one of the other pages we have.
And so
that was, on you go, Jim.
But I mean, that was, I felt bad about doing it, but at the same time, I'm thinking, wow, we found, somebody else who's affected by this much more than I was.
Sure. And
so I thought that kind of showed how powerful that our reach can be at times.
Yeah. And of course, I apologized on True Crime Grapple's behalf on that. We are going to make mistakes, and I think I got a like from a response from that apology.
That's good. Because I'll tell you what happened. It was a part of. I switched the two females' names, first names. Yeah. I was talking about the body being found 50 yards away, and I did it. I think it was one time, and then the rest of it I just used the correct last name in that little part. Yeah. But I still felt horrible about it, and if she ever listens to this broadcast, my apologies profusely about it, because it's going to happen. It shouldn't happen, but it's going to happen, and no matter how many times we get it read, little thing like that might happen, and so
that's it. But sometimes it takes a different set of eyes to see a mistake.
So I was, like I said, I felt awful about that because I pride myself on trying to get everything correct, and it just slipped through.
Yeah. Well, we'll wrap things up there, Jim. Obviously, this is when I remember reading this story for the first time when you sent it through. I usually like to kind of surmise my thoughts on it as well. It just seems so senseless. I wish we could get answers. I wish we could find out who this third person is, and hopefully down the line, with the genealogy stuff that's going on at the moment, they might well link this and find this third person. I'm pretty sure we'll get there someday.
When the case happened, it scared the hell out of me.
Mm.
Because I was 14. Something like that just didn't happen in our area, and of course the biggest part was not knowing. That was the worst part.
Sure.
And I used to always imagine what Joey had gone through, what the other people had gone through that night, and that I was always like, I mean, I just no matter what I thought, it had to be a million times worse than anything I could try to think of, and the not knowing for years. That was probably the scariest part, and that's why I'm thankful that we do find out a lot of some of these things based on genealogy, because the people need to know what happened.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All
And
right.
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say absolutely, Jim. Yeah, I agree.
Uh, and so now, of course, you just finished up with the bucket list case.
Sure.
I'm gonna get a plug in for that. You have a tendency to come up with the craziest cases ever between I mean, this bucket list and uh, the eating, people
uh,
wanting to be eaten. That was the craziest. And then
yeah,
you have the two 10-year-old boys show up.
I know.
Uh,
Yeah, they are.
you know,
The bucket
yeah, I don't.
list is one that we're hoping to try and get something done today, but we probably won't get that done today. I've got to take the little one back up the road. So
Okay.
got to get our stuff
What?
packed. But I'd love to talk over that case with you in our time.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. And I think, and we got another case coming out in about a week, don't we?
Yeah, we should have one out in a week or so, and yeah, that'll be another great one. We should probably actually mention. We'll just mention this because what we're planning to do is release. We're going to release this as a bonus anyway. I'm thinking maybe a few days after we release that episode that is due out next week. So
Okay.
we'll set the record straight here right now. I think for that um, case file, of course, released. Well, we actually released Mark Kilroy before case file did a few days before it, and then we released the bucket list, and lo and behold, they are going to be released, or they have released the episode we are going to be releasing this week.
Right. About two
So
weeks. About 2 weeks ago, I discovered that it was like, oh, wait a second.
yeah, yeah. So there's just in case anybody's out there sort of listening to case file and listening to us, that's sort of what's happened, and it's just a sheer coincidence. So hopefully you enjoy ours just as much as you did theirs.
Hopefully that should be. Like I said, it should be that it it's an easy listen to, because I think it's going to be a little bit shorter than our normal episodes. So it should be nice and compact, and hopefully by the time people listen to this, they've already listened to that one too. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it's worth noting as well that um, you have you didn't listen to it, did you?
no, not. I didn't want to be
You didn't want to be influenced by it.
influenced. Right.
That's the point I was going to make because I've not listened to it either, so I've no idea how it was narrated in the case file end, and I don't want to know how. I just want to do it and just go in my own style. And you've done it with your writing as well, so which I think's cool. So hopefully for the audience, there's going to be quite a bit of difference there in certain aspects.
Right. And I didn't listen to the Mark Kilroy either, even though I didn't have anything to do with Mark Kilroy, just because I don't want to make a comparison. I'll eventually go back and listen to theirs, both of them, at
Yeah,
some point in the future, I guess, just because I'm curious. But at the same time, I'm not. When I was writing this, and I was writing this especially over the last 2 weeks, I spent a lot of time writing, and so that was I didn't want to have any of their thoughts or the way that they did anything influence what I did.
exactly. Yeah. Okay, Jim, let's wrap this up. And thanks very much for joining us on the bonus show. It's been great to have you and look forward to it again. And thank you, everyone else that has listened to it. Hope you enjoyed this little bonus episode for you all. We've gone way over. We've done an hour and 5 minutes of recording here, and we usually try and keep it to half an hour. So you've got a good bonus for this free episode that you're getting. So,
when you and I talked about this, I told you I want to talk about, how this led into the second story I did, the Bath school massacre.
Oh, sure.
And we didn't get to that part of it, and so we still have lots more to talk about. And
we do.
And I think that I've also told you, I've talked about this briefly, and I'll go ahead and put out here into for the world to hear, so I'll make sure I do it. I'm writing a special bonus episode for the subscribers that's going to be a little bit different. And I'm not sure exactly how the format's going to be yet. I'm still debating that because I want to write it in first person, but at the same time, I know you'll probably be the one reading it. And so that may seem a little weird. But I am working on something that's going to be exclusive to the subscribers, at least at first. That's going to be a little bit different. So that gives them something kind of look forward to, hopefully.
www.patreon.com/truecrimegrapple to sign up for that. And that will be in the $5 tier. You just got to do it to help the show out. And there'll be a lot more bonus episodes that will be specific to that feed and not the feed you're listening to this show on. So count yourself lucky. Every now and again, we'll drop a bonus episode on the regular feed, but more often than not, they're going to be on the subscriber-only feed or the paid-for feed to help out the show and help out run with the running costs and whatnot.
Right.
But the one I'm writing now, the one I was just talking about, it really doesn't fit as far as it's not explicitly true crime. It has some other aspects to it, but it all kind of fits together. And so that's another reason why I want to release it a little bit differently, because I think it's a great story, but it is a little bit different. It sure is. And I can't wait to hear it or read it or narrate it, whatever. Anyway, Jim, I really got to get going. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, great. Enjoy the rest of your day off, and I'm about to go to bed because I got to work in the morning. So,
all right, enjoy that. Cheers, Jim.
Okay.
Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.